This is Sydney.
And I'm Sher.
And each week we get together to share with you a message of hope.
It is through our own experiences and personal study that we offer the reminder to seek the light.
And to be the light.
There is hope and there is peace.
And as long as one of us is slightly caffeinated, there will be laughter.
This week we will be talking about the two great commandments, love God and your neighbor.
And we are so glad you're here, neighbor.
I'm forging my way through the tip top. I'm living my life through the drip drop.
All right, Sydney, let's talk about the two great commandments, which are
definitely saying yes to carbs and checking your zodiac sign.
Okay, I'm pretty sure that's not it.
Okay, let's get to the Bible then. Get out of my own verse and into God's.
That might be a better option.
Oh, you and God probably think so, but as for me and my house, we're staying in this brain.
I think I need to leave. All right, so the two great commandments are love God and your neighbor. This is in Matthew 22, verses 35 through 40. Then one of them, which was a lawyer, asked him a question, tempting him and saying, Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it, Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So let's talk about this. Here's this lawyer who is trying to tempt, another word for tempt Christ is to trick him, to make him say something that he shouldn't.
Right. And he came prepared because he's a lawyer.
Of course. So he's like really smart and stuff.
Right.
And he's trying to trap God. I don't think that's going to work out very well.
Probably not, but Christ, he knows what's going on. He says in Luke 10's version, the lawyer asked, Master, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He's coming with a question, but Christ knows he already has an answer because he turns it on him and he says, well, what's written in the law? Because he knows that he knows. And he said, how readest thou? And the man answers, and his answer is very beautiful and probably maybe likely rehearsed. He says, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy strength and with all thy mind, and thy neighbor as thyself.
That is good.
It's a beautiful answer. And we truly don't know where his heart's at.
Right.
Maybe he really does honestly have some questions.
Yeah.
And maybe he's truly honestly a douchebag.
Yeah.
We don't know.
It's
We
true.
don't know. There's not enough information on his personal life.
Good point.
We could assume the best of the guy, that he's like, I've studied, I've done this. What else do I need? Or he could be like, watch this, bros.
Yeah. But since we're talking about loving your neighbor, we'll go with the first option that you gave.
What's interesting is he does teach this educated man. He teaches him the answer through the same way he taught everybody, which is through parables, which is the way he brought to life eternal principles for the people to actually understand, things that they would relate to. And they would relate to the parable that he tells, which is the story of the Good Samaritan.
Love that story.
Want to tell it?
Sure.
Do it, girl.
Basically, what the Savior explains to the lawyer is that there was a man who got the crap beat out of him, and thieves stole all his stuff and left him by the side of the road for dead. And then a priest came along and saw this man beat up, bloodied, bruised, and just went more and walked by. And then
Exactly the noise he made.
yeah, the next person that came along was the Levite, and the Levite did the same thing and went, ew, gross, bloody, bleh, and kept moving. Then the third person came along who was a Samaritan, and we all know the Samaritan was the nemesis of the Jewish community. Nobody liked them. They didn't like each other. And it was the Samaritan who stopped and took care of this person.
Right. And even diving into the story more, the Levite and the priest, they didn't just think he was disgusting and move on, but they actually moved to the other side of the road and passed him that way, which is a very big gesture to see someone completely unable to help themselves who's been done bad and done wrong. And to say, I'm going to not only look away and not help you, I'm going to put effort into moving away from you. Yes. When you see someone in the store that you don't want to see, so you go down a completely different aisle that you weren't going to go to just to avoid saying hi. These two guys are avoiding helping someone who's in dire need of help. But the Samaritan didn't just help him. He served him to the next level. He put oils on him, which are expensive. So he used his own goods there. He bounded him up. He took him to an inn, paid for his stay, paid for his care, and then said, if this will cost more, I'll come back tomorrow. He does come back the next day, and he pays and checks in on the guy.
Remember, this is the Jewish arch enemy.
They did not like each other.
At all. So imagine in your head right now, whoever is your nemesis out there, they're the ones who stopped and took care of the person.
Right. So then Christ says, so who's the neighbor? Bro. He did not say bro, but Christ asks, so which one's the neighbor? And the lawyer replies, the one that showed mercy. So is not Christ saying your neighbor is the one that you despise the most, your greatest enemy, and everything in between?
That is our
because that
neighbor.
is how they felt towards each other.
Yeah.
Not just who lives next door, but can you be a neighbor to someone who is on completely a different belief system as you, different experiences as you, because that's what they were. And the guy went above and beyond to serve him.
Yes. This reminds me of kind of like in high school when there's always the cliques and the groups that are fighting each other all the time.
Right. I was homecoming queen. Therefore, I could relate to
Sydney.
this. Everyone wanted to. No, that's not true. I was actually in charge of counting votes.
Oh, good job.
Things. I did the recount before it was popular.
Oh, you made it cool.
They're like, who is that? Who's that girl that won? I'm like, it's me, the counter of the votes. That's who's won. Give me that crown, neighbor.
Anyway, but that's what it reminded me of. Just to dig a little bit deeper, the Apostle Paul actually explains further in Romans 13, 8 through 10. He said, owe no man anything but to love one another. For he that loveth another hath fulfilled the law. For this, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not covet. And if there be any other commandment, it is briefly comprehended in this saying, namely, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Love worketh no ill to his neighbor. So basically what Paul is explaining is that all of the commandments of God fall under these two categories.
That's true, because if you love your neighbor, you're not going to murder them or steal from them.
Yes.
Or be like, your husband is one good looking man. That's the adultery one. That's not a good neighbor.
Right. That is not a good neighbor. But if you take all the commandments, everything you learn in the scripture, you're like, wow, that is a lot of things to do. But really, it all boils down to love God, love your neighbor. That's it. They all fell under those categories.
That's right. But even going back to the high school thing.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, my next door neighbor, her name, Linda, and I adored her because she was so good to me. I remember walking home so many times from school because there was a group of mean girls and I was not.
There's
cool
always
enough.
the mean girl group.
Oh, they change over the years, so you don't have to hold that grudge forever, but it's a normal thing. And you're in middle school, so you see it.
Yeah.
Cliques are real. So I remember feeling discouraged a few times when I was younger, walking home. And Linda, I didn't know her from church or activities like that. She was just her own person. And I trusted whatever she said because she said it so confidently, standing outside with her cigarette. And she'd be like, Sydney. And I adored her. I still do to this day. She'd be like, don't get down. You're better than everybody. And I believed her to some degree, or I just needed to hear it maybe. And I believed that she said what she wanted to say.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't really want to put someone else down, but she did that for me. She's like, you are better than all of this, and you're going to go and you're going to have a great life. This is nothing. And she would always remind me that. She was the greatest neighbor.
That is a great neighbor. That is a really
I love
good
her to
neighbor.
this day. She's amazing, amazing woman. And so I thought of her when I was thinking of neighbors, that walking with my head hung low, walking past her house, stick her head out and be like, don't you forget, you're better than everybody. Thank you, Linda. So then
That
I'd
is
go
a
in
really good neighbor.
And
Going
then-
out of her way just to say something kind.
to notice me.
Absolutely.
At this time, you know, I'm 13 and
Yeah.
going through middle school and high school experience. And we were poor. I didn't have great clothes. And I felt that more than probably other people noticed. But she took notice of me. She noticed when I was feeling sad, and she would yell out or swear out with so much energy that I was great. And I just needed that. And she saw it. And it was great to feel seen in those moments.
Yeah, that actually leads us right into the next question. What does it mean in today's world to love your neighbor? And I think what you just explained was a great example of what it means. There's not an exact definition of what it looks like. And there's Linda. yelling at you positive messages as you were walking by going to school. So let's keep talking about this. What does it mean in today's world to love your neighbor?
I listened to a TED Talk by Michael Wood Lewis. He and his wife moved into a town that was known for being incredible neighbors. He said that when he moved in, he was really excited because they wanted that community. They wanted to know their neighbors and break the cycle of, 20 years ago where you knew your neighbor to now where it's very uncommon to know your neighbors. And so he said that they moved in and they hadn't met anybody. And even months later, they hadn't met anybody. And so they felt a little bit discouraged about it. But then one day they came home and there was all of these people cleaning up tables and chairs. And so he walked out to the circle and he's like, what's going on? And they said, oh, we just had our annual block party. And he said, oh.
And they didn't invite him?
He didn't invite him and his wife.
That's terrible.
And he said, I would like to know about these things. We would definitely come and contribute. And they said, oh, you just have to live in the neighborhood for 10 years.
What?
I know.
This is not
heartbreaking.
Real. Is this real?
I mean, it's his speech. Didn't check in on his story. He got a TED Talk.
All right, fine. Okay, keep going.
So I loved how he and his wife handled it. They said, we don't want to wait 10 years. We want to be part of the neighborhood now. So they made a bunch of cookies. And he said, I have an idea. Instead of putting the cookies on paper plates, let's put them on our real plates because then they'll have to give them back and we'll get to know each other. And then what happened was nobody brought back the plates and they didn't get any of their plates back but one. He got one back because the person sold it at their yard sale for 25 cents.
This is not a real story.
So he said that not only did he not make any friends.
Who are these people?
10 years.
Okay.
Get on the decade plan. What's wrong with that? If you're still neighbors after 10 years, then that
I guess
deserves a hello at that
fair.
point. Why
All
waste
right.
your time?
Yeah. Why?
You've only lived here for 9 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Not worth it.
You're out. Okay,
So
continue.
he said that they tried and attempted a few things and it just didn't work. But then he and his wife, who I feel like have to be the most outgoing and positive people, had an idea. They
so
said,
patient.
what if we use today's world and do technology and started a Facebook group for the neighborhood? And everybody got involved and was very social, got to know each other. He shares the cool story of a single mom who just moved in, not a 10-year, and she just moved in and wrote on the page, my daughter's turning 15. She wants to go kayaking. I wanted to put together this party for her, but the kayaks are so expensive, I can't afford them. Does anybody have one that we could borrow or rent, but at a better rate that I could afford? And he said the next morning she woke up with kayaks in her lawn, enough that they needed.
Wow.
I know. And then he said that before she even put those away, 4 more were coming.
That's incredible. So they weren't
wonderful
jerks after all.
They just needed a system. In our day, it's very hard to put yourself out there.
It is.
One, it's dangerous.
Yeah.
You don't know who lives
There's
next
some
to you.
creepers out there.
Yes. And you don't know. So I think that if you have small children, just going and letting them run around, you're going to be a little bit scared.
Yeah.
Because you watch the news, you see what's going on. So I think that's justifiable.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also really amazing people.
Yes.
So I loved his story. But then he and his wife started a business where that's what they do is they help neighborhoods put together Facebook groups and build a community.
Well, that's pretty cool.
It's really cool. That's loving your neighbor.
That is loving your neighbor.
Love your neighbor without getting to know them. Can you?
I don't think so. I think you do have to get to know your neighbor.
Maybe if you get to know your neighbor, then it will help you to love them.
Yes.
Maybe you could just say as a blanket, I love everybody and I'm going to be a peaceful person. But if you really want to build a community, you have to get to know your neighbor. And in the process of getting to know your neighbor, chances are you're going to learn to love them.
I completely agree with that. Again, a lot of that has to do with that he created a way for them to serve each other. And that's what led to the love.
And the people want to serve each other. He shared several stories of people asking for help and people serving. People want to. It's in our DNA. Yeah. It's just that first initial getting to know the person who lives in your area. Or I actually remember this time when I was in Walmart and I had my 2 little boys with me at the time. We were checking out with all our delicious Walmart purchases. And a woman, she was at a register, one over, she fell.
Oh, no.
She was pregnant, very pregnant. And
no,
she
again.
fell. And she had 2 little kids with her. And people stood and looked
No.
Nobody did anything. I could not believe it.
Me either.
So I did, but I stood there in shock that nobody helped her. And I went and I helped her up. She sat on the bench and she just was breathing heavy and almost in tears. And nobody else came over for about 10 minutes. And then another woman came over and was like, "Are you okay? Are you fine?" So actually there was a TikTok I saw that talked about herd mentality. That's a young girl who shared a story that her professor, I believe, did, which was had everybody sit down. And he took a fish out of water and he put it on the desk. And he said, "If anybody touches this fish, you will fail my class." And then he left. And everybody stood there and watched the fish die.
Oh.
Nobody got up until about a few minutes in, a girl said that she had had enough. And there was people crying and upset, and they didn't budge. They didn't want to fail the class. And finally a girl said, "I don't care if I fail, I'm getting up." And she got up and she put the fish back in the water. And
Did the fish live? Can we just
Sure.
pretend it lived?
I don't
Okay.
know.
All right.
And then they had sushi.
No, let's pretend it lived. Okay. So the fish was saved.
Then the professor came back in and he said, "Shame on you guys. It took you over 2 minutes to save a dying fish because you were so afraid of your grade that you wouldn't help a dying fish." And his lesson was about herd mentality, that if you just sit there, other people will just sit there. And the chances are, same thing with Walmart, when that person fell, a pregnant woman.
Yeah.
How did not everybody rush to her? I
Agree.
could not believe it. Titus was a baby and I was the one that helped. How is it that a pregnant woman fell? Nobody helps except for a woman with a baby herself. We have to break that and make a decision now that if you ever see somebody who is in need of help, no matter where you are, no matter who they are, that you are brave enough to be the one to go and break the cycle, because the chances are, sadly, that nobody else is going to do it.
I think you bring up a really good point, because you do have to make that decision and have it in your head now, like, this is what I'm going to do. A few weeks ago at work, we were having a faculty lunch, and one of the teachers was leaving the area and she was walking up some stairs that were right behind us, and she fell and she was carrying food and it went all over the place. Now, I don't know this teacher very well. And I kept thinking one of her friends, someone that knows her better, is going to run and help her. And nobody did, not one person. And so finally I got up, and by this time she had run away, and she said, "I'll come back and clean the mess up." But I got up and cleaned the mess up. And then I went and found her, and I apologized because I was so disappointed in myself that I didn't get up and run to help her. So I really think it is a decision that you have to make right now, that when you see that you're not going to freeze. Because I think a lot of it is you just freeze when you see something. You need to have it in your head now that if this happens, this is what I'm going to do.
Right. Don't say to yourself, you're going to wait for the one to help. Be the one that is going to help.
Yeah.
And we do freeze for different reasons. And I think we go through those experiences to help us for the next time. So
Yes.
if I ever saw someone fall, because I hesitated for a second, I felt so shocked. Nobody, especially the people right by her.
Yeah. You keep thinking, oh, they're going to go do it.
Yes, and they didn't. And I'm sure everyone was frozen for different reasons. I don't think anyone was truly like, ha,
She
pregnant
fell.
woman, that's what you get.
Yeah.
Good luck with 3 kids.
Yeah.
I don't think it was like that. I think it was just a total shock and a total freeze. But if you make that decision now and make the decision to not worry about how you look if you're the one who says something
Yeah.
or who takes action, just make the decision that you're going to do it, however small or large,
Right.
if
And
it's for good.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are several people that saw that were doing what I was doing and kicking themselves. Like, why didn't I go and help?
Right. Or even that thought, okay, well, she's been helped now, it's done. But that lady that came later was important too.
Yeah.
It was important for me in a selfish way of just not feeling so hopeless for,
that people had just lost their
Yeah.
soul.
because it was very discouraging and very sad situation.
Yeah.
So I really did appreciate her coming over. In the same TED Talk, he lists reasons why you should get to know your neighbors, not just the community, but for times of calamity, emergencies, and things like that,
Yeah.
which I found to be true because not that long ago, our electricity went out this crazy winter that we're having. And we had no power for a whole day while the storm was falling. And I actually text you. I had just found out that it was not the whole neighborhood.
It was not the whole neighborhood.
I thought we were
had
all
electricity.
in this together.
Nope.
My family and I were snuggled by a fire and then barely getting by the day. It was freezing.
And I was just living the dream at my house.
Yeah. Literally the neighbors right in front of us were living their best life. But we didn't know until night came. And I looked outside and I was like, oh, the electricity is on. Everyone has their power on. And the kids said, not us. And that's when I think I had texted you and I was like, do you guys have power? We are alone in this. So we found out we were the first house of many rows that didn't have power all that day. But everyone around us did.
It's true.
Which felt very lonely. So I had told you that we didn't have power. And you asked me, do you want me to bring a charger? And I declined because I had just sent my kids over to somebody else's house right next door to charge our stuff. So I was like, we'll be fine. We have a fire and electronics. So my kids were over there for 45 minutes and they came back and everything was dead. And I said, what? They're like, oh, we didn't check to make sure they were charging. And so apparently it was like on the one outlet of my friend's house that had to have a switch on for the power to run. And so the whole time my kids were over there, nothing charged. And we were sitting there and I thought, guys, I truly said to them more than once, make sure when you plug it in that you know it's charging. Otherwise, we're without electronics the rest of the night in the dark. And so they came back with dead iPads and dead phones. And Ben and I were sitting there by the fire and we were like, do we laugh at this point or do we kick them out and make them fend for themselves? And then there was a knock at the door. And who was it? It was you and our other friend, Shelly. And you guys had that baby generator in hand and you did not take my no thank you for an answer. You brought it over and you got my kids McDonald's. I don't know if we've ever had so much service in our life offered that touched our hearts so much. And it was awesome for me, but my children, to have them see that. One of them had just said a prayer that we'll work it out. They were like, please don't let our parents be mad at us. And we're like, we're not mad. And it was so cool to see somebody else think of our family and bring exactly what we needed and to serve us that way. And they were so touched, and that will be a lesson that they remember. So our good neighbor, you and Shelly, really did touch our family's heart so much that night. And we were just incredibly grateful for the example that you set.
Well, thank you. I don't know if I deserve all that. I think we're just more like one to go say, hey, might as well bring our stuff over.
Recharged my children's electronics. That is like saint level. I will now call you Saint Sher.
Oh, good. Thank you. No, I'm just glad that we could help. So that all worked out.
But it's because you know me and you took care of me and you served your neighbor. And I really appreciated it.
Well, you're very welcome. And because I feel awkward, I'm going to move on if that's okay. So
do it.
Yeah. So continue talking about loving your neighbor. I wanted to read something yet again from Abraham Lincoln. And it's from the second inaugural address. Apparently I'm a little obsessed with it, but I wanted to read this little part of it. And Lincoln said, when he was talking about the Civil War, both read the same Bible and pray to the same God, and each invokes his aid against the other. The prayers of both could not be answered. That of neither has been answered fully. The Almighty has his own purposes. The reason I wanted to bring this up, I think the key to loving your neighbor is to just be on God's side. So if you love God, you're going to love your neighbor, and that's it. It's not about if you're a Republican or a Democrat or what religion you are.
Had to make it political, Sher.
Sorry. What faith, whatever it is that you believe, whatever your beliefs are, God's not a Republican and he's not a Democrat. He's God. So we need to be on his side because he really doesn't care about any of that. He's God. So when things start to get toxic, especially in the political world, we need to remember we just need to be on God's side. And continuing with that thought, President Russell M. Nelson said, as disciples of Jesus Christ, we are to be examples of how to interact with others, especially when we have differences of opinion. One of the easiest ways to identify a true follower of Jesus Christ is how compassionately that person treats other people. It's kind of like what you were doing at Walmart. True disciples build, lift, encourage, persuade, and inspire, no matter how difficult the situation. So again, we just need to be on the side of God.
I love that so much. The only other person I could think of that's outside of Abraham Lincoln and God is Fred Rogers, who we have to talk about.
I love Fred Rogers. Yeah.
I mean,
you do.
Neighbor.
Absolutely.
Won't you be my neighbor?
You've got to talk about Fred Rogers.
He is a beautiful, beautiful soul. I love him so much. He said, in loving your neighbor, we are participating in something sacred and eternal. And when he talked about it, he was saying that you're not seeing somebody for what they believe or what color their skin is or what their faith is. You are seeing someone the way God intends us to see them, which is eternal. So you're seeing them for who they actually are.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Sydney, because we truly are children of God, which makes us brothers and sisters. So our goal should be to try to see the divinity in each other.
Actually, that's exactly what C.S. Lewis says in a quote. It is a serious thing to live in a society of possible gods and goddesses, to remember that the dullest, most uninteresting person you can talk to may one day be a creature which, if you saw it now, you would be strongly tempted to worship. What he is saying is that if you could see other people in God's eyes, then you would understand their potential and their divinity. And going back to Fred Rogers, actually, I think that was something that he was so naturally good at, is the way he saw everybody, but especially children, and how kind and loving and what a genuine person he was. I love the stories that come from him. He talks about once he got to go and sit in the White House to talk about TV productions for children. And he was sitting there among the highest up in the government. And at the end of his presentation, he was thanked by the first lady and the president, and then they went on with their day. And as he walked out, there was a man in full uniform who whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Rogers." And he looked at him and he had wet eyes. What I love about this is he was just in the room with the president of the United States. And this person who just stood guard stuck out to him the most, caused him to stop. And he said, "Thank you for what?" And the man, given permission to speak, said, "Your speech today reminded me of my grandfather's brother. I only knew him until I was 7, and he gave me a fishing pole. And your speech reminded me of why I love fishing so much to this day." And I love this story because Fred Rogers talks about this person with so much dignity and love. And he said he knew he was put there that day among these people, not for any other reason, but for that man. He was put there to help him, to stir up this memory, to help him feel grateful for someone in his life. He said, "What marvelous mysteries we are privileged to be a part of." And he said, "How is it I was there on that day? That guard was there on that day, and that speech brought up that memory that was important to him." It is not a coincidence. He says that it happened because of the workings of God. And if we are willing to take notice, he could have walked by and said, "You're welcome, carry on." But he didn't.
He stopped.
He stopped.
And that's the key. It's to stop and notice. Just like Linda stopped and noticed you. You reminded me, I would feel horrible if I didn't say this. I think my parents are excellent examples of stopping and noticing people. My mom was always worried about the neighbors. If she made any extra food, she was always telling me, "Oh, this person's not feeling very well," or "This person's having a hard day," or "This person's blah, blah, blah. Go run this over to the neighbor." And I hated it as a kid. I felt like all I was doing was running and dropping food off or treats off or whatever to the neighbors. But I realized why she made me do it now as an adult. But also my dad was also an example of this. He always had time to go help people. Oh, this person's painting. My dad suddenly had time to go help that person. But one of the things that my dad taught me, which I think is really important because it's a life lesson I will never forget. It was one of those moments that literally changed my life forever. I was probably, I don't know how old I was, but the snarky attitude, I was probably closer to a teenager, so maybe 13. And my dad's friend was over helping him fix his truck. And at one point I went and I opened the fridge. So in our house, we didn't drink alcohol unless you were sick. And then you had alcohol. So it was associated with medicine and horrible.
Which is pretty brilliant if you don't want your kid to drink alcohol.
Exactly. I was like, ew, I'm not sick. I don't want any of that. Anyway, so I opened the fridge and my dad's friend had put a stash of, I don't know, beer, I think, in the fridge. And I was like, oh my gosh, she has beer in our fridge. And so I went outside for whatever reason. And I don't remember what I said, but I know I said something snarky to my dad's friend about the beer in the fridge. And my dad looked at me and he just said, go in the house. And that's all he said. And I knew I was in trouble. And I went in the house and I was like, thinking the whole time, what's he going to say to me? Because he's drinking alcohol. So I'm obviously right. Anyways, my dad's friend left and the truck was fixed. And then my dad asked me to come outside onto the patio. So I knew I was in trouble, but I had planned. I was like the lawyer, right? I was ready with my dad and I was going to trap my dad in my genius 13-year-old brain. And I went out there and my dad said to me, who do you think you are? And I was like, well, we don't drink alcohol. And he said, I asked you, who do you think you are? Who followed the Savior more today? You or him? You tell me, who came to serve? You or him? Who was the one walking around pointing out faults or perceived faults? You or him? What did you do to serve your neighbor today? Who followed Christ? And I melted.
Ouch.
I just melted. And he let me know that his friend was living a Christ-like life. I was being a judgmental little brat. And I will never forget that lesson ever. And I think it has shaped my life teaching at a middle school that's a little rough, that who am I? Because a lot of the students that I teach, they may be involved in gangs or have situations in their life that are terrible. I've always tried to remember, no matter what situation that I have been in, who is living the more Christ-like life that day. So can you be a good neighbor when your neighbor is not one?
Your neighbor is nice because one of the first times I came over here, I knocked on the wrong door.
Yes, you did.
And there was a man eating wings and it smelled so good. And I was like, I'm at the wrong house. And he's like, you want some wings? And I did, but I said no.
He kindly pointed you to the correct house.
Did. Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah. So yes, I do have good neighbors. So one of the things I was thinking about though, what if my neighbor is yucky? I mean, I don't want to befriend and be nice to the serial killer next door.
I'd rather him like me than not like me.
That's true. Me too.
Remember the times I brought you cookies? He's
Right.
like, that's why this is over for you.
Yeah.
Those are horrible. Don't bake again.
So you should just stay away from the serial killers
Keep
and
yourself
the
safe.
creepers. So I found this quote and I thought it was really good. It's by President Russell M. Nelson. He said, boundless mercy could oppose justice. So tolerance without limit could lead to spineless permissiveness. The Lord drew boundary lines to define acceptable limits of tolerance. Danger rises when those divine limits are disobeyed. Just as parents teach little children not to run and play in the street, the Savior taught us that we need not tolerate evil. Jesus went into the temple of God and overthrew the tables of the money changers. Though he loved the sinner, the Lord said that he cannot look upon sin with the least degree of allowance. So I'm going to summarize that using a phrase my mom used to always say. The Lord said you need to forgive people. He never said you had to be stupid. So for today's topic, the Lord said you need to love your neighbor, but he never said you had to be stupid. So
That's a good summary for
right?
it. Yeah, that is. Because be safe.
Yes, exactly. I've thought a lot about what my mom has said. That quote always comes into my brain because where I teach, there are a lot of gangs. And I never, ever understood truly what it meant to love your neighbor until I started working at the school I'm working at and have students that are in opposing gangs and they don't like each other. So let's just think about this. I have students that have been the murderers and I have students that were murdered and I love both of them. And that's how God looks at all of us. He loves all of us. I want to make it clear, and my students know this because I'm not afraid to say it. I do not condone gangs. I do not condone the violence and the hatred and the lifestyle that it brings and the destruction it brings to families. I do not condone any of that, and they know that. But hopefully they know that I love them on both sides. I love them. And that is how Heavenly Father looks at us. He doesn't condone all the dumb things that I do, but he loves me for who I am. And he loves you for who you are.
That reminded me when I was in high school, my friend who is a fabulous artist, she had a vision of a certain kind of picture she wanted to draw. And she asked my brother if he would model. And he, at the time, was pretty deep already into some drugs and alcohol. But he agreed, and I couldn't believe it. But he just loved Joni as much as I do, and he just couldn't say no. So he let me take a picture and send it to her, and she gave it back. And this has stuck with me my whole life. It's a picture of my brother Grady and Christ's hand, and it's his hand touching his face. And it says on the bottom, "Behold the workmanship of mine own hands."
Oh, that is amazing.
It was most perfect for me because I also could have been considered a bit of a judgmental brat growing up, and I really hated the stuff that he was into. And I wanted him to quit doing those things out of love, but also sibling, how lovely we can be to each other sometimes.
Exactly.
That picture has come to my mind over and over and over through the years, through Grady's darkest times. I remember that drawing of him with Christ's hand reaching out, "Behold the workmanship of mine own hands." And I was reminded by that picture of how Grady was seen, even at his darkest times, by God. And it reminds me of a quote that says, "Are you your brother's keeper? No, but you are your brother's brother, and you are your brother's sister."
Our final thoughts are there are 2 great commandments, to love God and to love your neighbor.
And to love our neighbor in our day is no different than it was in the Good Samaritan's day, that they didn't get along. They weren't the best of buds. And there were people who did step aside to the other street, but that's not who we're going to be. We're going to be the people who make a decision now that we will be the ones to do it. And to understand that you're not going to change somebody's mind in your Facebook comment or your opinion, but that's not the goal. Our goal is to be more understanding of where someone else is coming from and to see the divinity that is in them, to see them as God sees them, or as Fred Rogers sees everybody.
And we know that it's super hard to be a good neighbor when the person that you're trying to be kind to is not kind back. So in my mom's words, the Lord said we need to forgive or love your neighbor, but that doesn't mean you have to be stupid. So you can be kind, but don't put yourself in a bad situation. So our challenge this week is to be kind and notice your neighbor. If you see someone fall, pick them up, wave at your neighbor, smile at somebody. Just try to be a little bit more kind as you go throughout your day. Let your light shine. We truly are brothers and sisters. So let's help each other along the way to get back home.
Whoever you're around, try, even if you need to add prayer, to see them as God sees them. Even if it's your own children who are bugging you, God has entrusted you to raise them. God has entrusted us to be friends with those around us and to take care of those who are in our reach. We can do it. And we can be brave enough to do it and make the decision now to be the ones to do it. So go be a good neighbor, like Fred Rogers.
All right, have a good week.
I'm forging my way through the tip top. I'm living my life through the drip drop. When